Whether you're a hardcore fan who's been reading, watching and collecting everything from Amazing Fantasy onwards, or someone who just dips in and out every so often to see what's going on, I think every fan of Spider-Man has at least one incarnation they consider to be theirs. For me, it's John Semper's 1990s cartoon, but with this one being so close together with it, I do have memories of watching it alongside. Some consider Spider-Man Unlimited a sequel, as certain elements are taken, but I was never really among them, as those elements don't tie in with how things play out in the series. I'll go into that when relevant. Production overall looks like it was kind of messy, with mandates, money and movie development all playing a part. Not entirely the fault of the writing staff, mind you, as they included a team that worked on animated shows since the 1980s and some of whom even wrote episodes for the previous series. Just a case of dealing with the hand you're given in play. Going by the now defunct blog of showrunner Will Munoz, the idea was to have something going until the inevitable movie could be made. So the initial plan was a retelling of the early years of the Stan Lee and Steve Ditko stories. When Sony then got the movie rights, this messed things up, and they were given a mishmash of things they could and couldn't use. This apparently included the suit itself, hence the redesign we see for the series, which does at least give it its own identity if nothing else. Other ideas included an adaptation of Spider-Man 2099, which probably could have worked given the sci-fi setting we get, plus High Evolutionary is an immortal, so he could have been kept on as a villain as the mandate stated. This was turned down in the end due to being considered too similar to Batman Beyond, and possibly because Peter Parker was acting as a bit of a linchpin. Spreading its 13 episodes across 1999 to 2001 in the US, Spider-Man Unlimited ultimately ended up being cancelled after one season's worth of episodes, on a cliffhanger no less, due at least in part to Pokemon being the ratings giants of the time, similar to Power Rangers before it. That said, I'm pretty sure I remember it airing in full in the UK rather than the US air dates I've picked from Wikipedia and IMDb, spacing it out over these years. Of course, I'm going on 25-year-old memory here, so I could be wrong on that front. The number of more familiar characters to non-comic fans was small, with a new voice cast even for the few that did return. The only actor from the 90s cartoon to return being Jennifer Hale, but as Mary Jane rather than Felicia, as well as one other major character. It was also the first outing of Rino Romano as Spidey, about a year prior to telling us he was already at full health. The star of the show is of course Peter Parker as Spider-Man, now travelling to Counter-Earth, a version of Earth on the opposite end of the rotational axis. He's there in search of Colonel John Jameson, who becomes a more prominent character here, having had a small role in the 90s cartoon, being the one to accidentally introduce the symbiote to Earth in that one. On the note of the symbiotes, Venom and Carnage round out the more familiar rogues gallery, probably an Avi Arad thing as he's seemingly obsessed with them, though the latter has a redesign from what we usually see. There are a few other familiar names getting Counter-Earth variations, but we'll get to those when their episodes come up. Our main antagonist for Spider-Man Unlimited comes in the form of the High Evolutionary, one of the villains allowed by the mandates. Despite looking different from his comic and 90s X-Men cartoon portrayal, he serves the same role of being the creator of anthropomorphic people known as bestials in an attempt to create a utopia. Acting as his enforcers are the Knights of Wundagore, Sir Ram, Lord Tiger, Lady Ursula, and the other character Jennifer Hale voice, Lady Vermin. From Black Cat to White Rat. I have to admit it's been a long while since I've watched through this series. Part of me doing these reviews was the question of how it holds up after having not watched it in so long. With that in mind, let's begin with the two-part series opener. An unmanned probe has discovered a Counter-Earth, but was destroyed not long after sending footage of its existence. John Jameson plans to launch a flight with the spaceship Solaris 1 and establish contact in response. Peter and Jonah are attending the press conference, but suddenly Peter's spider sense starts tingling. Suiting up, he heads to the launch site and discovers two workers who turn out to be a disguised Venom and Carnage. Spider-Man tries to stop them, but they display strange new ways of morphing their bodies. They knock Spidey from the ship, but not before mentioning something called the synoptic. The only thing Jonah sees of this is Spidey falling from the ship, immediately assuming the worst about him. Not helping is that transmission with John is lost as Venom and Carnage make their attack. As a result, Jameson places a 10 million bounty on Spidey, making Peter's name worth something but unable to collect. New York's in an extra bad mood when it comes to Spider-Man 2, as the media campaign seems to be doing its job. Even emergency services make an attack on him as he saves a woman from a burning building. Not even saving a fireman from falling debris is enough to clear his name. Surviving getting crushed himself, Peter returns to Mary Jane and contemplates his situation. He ponders what he can do as Peter Parker as a news report shows a transmission from John mentioning strange creatures. 6 months pass as a rescue operation ship, the Solaris 2, is developed. Peter's managed to come on board the staff thanks to some help from Jameson. He also reveals a new suit using nanotech courtesy of Reed Richards, which at least solves the whole unmasking issue. Boarding the Solaris 2, Spidey's stopped by pre-Samuel L. Jackson Nick Fury. Convincing him to let him go as John's his responsibility, Spidey broadcasts he's heading on the rescue mission himself, also covering for Peter Parker as his publicist. Approaching Counter-Earth, he's soon brought down by a tractor beam. A team of machine men slow his descent, but the landing's still pretty fiery. The machine men prove unfriendly, but their commanders stop them when Spider-Man makes mention of his name. Known as the Knights of Wundagore, Lord Tiger introduces himself as well as Sir Ram, Lady Ursula and Lady Vermin. Realising they aren't friendly either, Spidey makes a retreat. Escaping into a building, he makes use of his new suit's cloaking feature to evade Vermin. He tries to make sense of this new world, but Vermin manages to catch him off guard. Strapped to a chair, Spidey has his first meeting with a High Evolutionary. Spidey being an unknown factor, he's seen as a threat, with Ram intending to use a more vicious method of unmasking and gaining a DNA sample. Spider-Man tries to keep them talking as he loosens his restraints. High Evolutionary indulges him, telling him he arrived at Counter-Earth hoping for a better life. Seeing it as ravaged by war as his own world, he spent decades creating his new life forms, the Bestials, as his apex species. Tiger interjects that maybe Spider-Man's not so bad, as he did notice him trying to help those around him in their pursuits, but it falls on deaf ears. All this talk has allowed Spidey enough time to break free. Outside, he encounters a group who came to rescue him. One of the group, Bromley, throws a bomb in the Knight's path to allow them time to get away. The woman, Karen, explains that the High Evolutionary's taken over them within a 50-year time period, and explains a bit about his enforcers. Vermin tracks the group as they approach their base. High Evolutionary decides to call off the other Knights in favour of someone else. That someone else being Venom and Carnage, who are assimilating people as soldiers for their synoptic. They also have no plans to actually serve the High Evolutionary once their goals stop aligning, while wondering if this is their Spider-Man or just a Counter-Earth version. John is revealed to be alive and working with the rebels. He's suspicious of Spider-Man but warms up after a quick test. Before they can talk further, Vermin and a team of synoptic-infected bestials attack the base. Spidey's less than enthusiastic in Vermin's personal interest in him. Venom and Carnage also join the fight, the former much more enthusiastic upon seeing it's the real Spider-Man. Karen and Bromley fight off Carnage, who turns his attention to John. Spidey then demonstrates his new sonic emitter, forcing Venom and Carnage to flee as well as freeing the bestials from the synoptic. While they're captured, John intends to simply shoot them to keep the base secret. Not wanting bloodshed, Spidey talks him down, reminding him that Vermin escaped so the base's location is compromised either way. Bromley doesn't take it well either, as his family were among High Evolutionary's earliest victims. Outside, John explains that he won't leave as he became caught up in saving the people from the High Evolutionary's rule. Spidey's not interested in that, but he's as stuck as John due to the Solaris 1 being seized as soon as he landed. John and Karen mention that Spidey's lucky in that he wasn't able to be tagged with a tracker like every other human, and while they have jammers, it's not 100% effective. Karen then hands Spidey a bag of supplies, to help him give some time to look around Counter-Earth and get a better idea of the situation. As a group of kids are playing, a machine man is hit by a car and malfunctions. It attacks a boy, Shane, but Peter is able to stop it. Shane's mother, a doctor named Naoko Yamada-Jones, they say it Naoko, but I'm going with my pronunciation, helps heal Peter up as thanks. She also provides him with a room, giving him 2 weeks free until he can find some paid work. I think part of why this was less remembered than the previous cartoon is the setting's kind of alien in comparison. No pun intended. Definitely not what you come to expect from Spider-Man, but so far entertaining enough to hold attention. A lot to get through to set up this world and the major players, so taking 2 episodes to do it allows for enough breathing room for introductions. Naoko and Shane's intro felt a bit tagged on right at the end, but there's enough there to set up the upcoming status quo for them. Bit careless of Peter to find a machine man unmasked, but given Spider-Man's an unknown, I suppose there's less of a risk. Character-wise, Peter's mostly on point, with the usual quipping and pop culture references, such as referring to Tiger as Tony. There's also the underlying frustration of being Spider-Man being thankless, but at the same time his inability to just walk away. Also nice to be reminded of better times when he and Mary Jane were still an item. No real complaints with John either, as he's heroic and a bit warmer towards Spidey than his father would be, even if his 6 months on Counter-Earth has started to embitter him. The time spent on regular Earth gets a bit contrived in how much of a pariah Spidey's portrayed. I suppose the news report does help alleviate it a bit, but I don't really buy a fireman attacking Spider-Man rather than, saving lives. Jameson's 10 million reward sounds about right though, as he consistently thinks the world of his son. Plus it was nice of him to give Peter a job at the Solaris 2's launch site, even if it means giving Peter the crazy idea that he might like him. I think the other big criticism I have is why didn't Vermin trigger Peter's spider sense when they were headed to the Rebel base, while at the start of the episode Venom and Carnage somehow did? To go into a bit of the whole sequel to the previous cartoon thing, there is a short theme tune cameo when Peter suits up for the first time. That said, Venom and Carnage were last seen falling into Dormammu's dimension, which could probably cause some confusion. Plus, Peter mentioning his new suit uses tech from Reed Richards tracks with the comics, as he's known the Fantastic Four since the first issue, but he only really worked with them in Secret Wars in the previous cartoon, and their memories were wiped afterwards anyway. Not something I'm going to dwell on with every episode, but just where it becomes most prominent. Visually it's nice enough, with its own standout art style and usage of dark colouring to give it a good sci-fi feel, as well as keeping it distinct from the previous series. Plus I like the comic-styled yellow text boxes introducing some scenes. The intro also manages to get across the Spider-Man origin effectively with the use of a few seconds of stills. It's also nice that in terms of writing it's allowed to get a bit darker, such as outright using the word kill after the 90s cartoon was pretty infamous for its rather odd censorship, even though they managed to get away with it a couple of times too. It's nothing explicit, but nice to see that fighting a revolution is taking its toll on people mentally. As a setup story, overall not a bad one. In the lower regions of Counter New York, known as the Basement, a man is grabbed by something and dragged into the sewers. Meanwhile, Peter's 2 weeks are up and he's still having trouble finding work. He presents a paper demanding pictures of Spider-Man, but Naoko is dubious. Shane overhears the two of them and runs off, with Naoko explaining it probably triggered memories of her arguing with his father while he was still around. While out searching for Shane, Naoko is attacked by the same sewer creature. Shane witnesses this and runs into Peter, telling him it was something green that grabbed her. Peter takes Shane home and suits up, aiming to get a better scope of things. His spider sense goes off as a certain pumpkin-shaped bomb is flung his way. Spidey's less than pleased to see the Green Goblin, accusing him of kidnapping Naoko. Goblin's confused but seems to recognise the name, causing Spidey to realise he's dealing with the Counter-Earth version. Revealing he's playing the role of masked vigilante, Goblin figures that Spidey's in league with Venom and Carnage due to the similar outfits and powers. He brings down Spidey with a gas grenade, but the new suit has a filter system built in. Their arguments interrupted by machine men surrounding them, as they don't take kindly to masked vigilantes. Shane heads out to find Peter, realising his tracker set to Naoko's tag might help. Spidey and Goblin decided it'd be better to team up for the moment, fending off the machine men. Spotting Shane entering the sewers, Goblin throws a grenade to mess with the machine men's optics. Exploring the sewers, something triggers the spider sense. Unfortunately, Spidey's too busy explaining the nature of the spider sense as the actual green thing descends upon them. Spidey apologises for the mistake as they flee, but it catches up and grabs the Goblin. Spidey's flung through another pipe, managing to evade capture for now. Meanwhile, Naoko's been caught by a synaptic infectee and brought before Venom and Carnage. Carnage reveals this underground tunnel, thought destroyed, is the central ground of the synaptic. Revealed to be comprised of symbiotes dating back to prehistory, the synaptic came together as a hive mind and now aims to assimilate all life on Counter-Earth and reclaim dominance. Presumably it's also gone into Venom's head as an explanation as to why he's working with Carnage. Spider-Man wakes up to find Shane, explaining he was helping Peter find Naoko. Shane offers to help, showing the tracker. Meanwhile, Goblin ditches his, I guess you'd call them trousers, to escape the synaptic. Spidey finds Naoko and saves her just as she's about to join the hive mind. He then jumps into the fray, activating the sonic emitter. Unfortunately, it seems like it's the series equivalent of the web shooters being empty, as it takes a lot of energy to keep using. Putting Naoko and Shane high up for safety, Spidey moves to attack the synaptic as the Green Goblin arrives. Goblin gets the mother and son to safety as Venom and Carnage close in on Spidey. A couple of wrecked pillars deals with them for the moment. Goblin returns to get Spidey out as the base collapses. Naoko and Shane thank Goblin for his help, though as they leave, Goblin refers to Naoko as his love. Meanwhile, Spidey takes a few candids for his rent money. He gets $100 a photo from the editor Mr. Munoz. Subtle. Enough to cover rent even if it's not the full $5,000, causing Peter to think back to a certain someone. Feels like something was missed here, as Venom seems to know Naoko and Naoko talks as if she knows about this underground lair of the synaptic. Only justification I can think for the former is that she's a doctor and that's likely rare in the basement. Also a bit contrived that it takes time for a symbiote to bond with her when it was instant with other victims, but TV show logic I suppose. Having Venom and Carnage as the main villains for this episode works as a bit of dialing back to a more familiar villain after the last two had to feed a lot of information and new characters for the setup. Green Goblin being heroic serves its purpose of reminding the audience this isn't the same Earth. The antagonism gets a good explanation too, with him thinking Spidey is with Venom and Carnage, while Spidey's Goblin was likely still responsible for some of the worst moments in his life. It's also possible this was reworked from an early idea Munoz mentioned in an interview, namely that Peter met with his Counter-Earth version only to learn he'd fully bonded with the symbiote due to Uncle Ben not dying. It was apparently shut down during production, as someone at Marvel feared it was evoking the infamous Clone Saga. Still, Rino Romano voicing both Spidey and Green Goblin suggests this was possibly a way of keeping the idea and working with it so Spider-Man's worst enemy is in his position on Counter-Earth. That said, I think they played their hand a bit too early on his pretty obvious identity as Naoko's estranged husband. The way he talks with a more personal delivery about Naoko and Shane was fine, but him outright referring to her as my love removes all mystery. And other adaptations have had some fun with Goblin's true identity, even if it did usually end up being Norman Osborn. Apparently Counter-Earth's Wolverine was considered in the comic adaptation, but seeing as I haven't read it, I couldn't say how they went about suggesting that one. Next time, a rebel with an explosive solution, a rogue droid, and a less friendly Counter-Earth member of the Rogues Gallery take us to episode 6. Until then,